Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, I told her to stop talking, she did. My fiancé and I have begun exercising together. She has a workout plan she's doing and I agreed to do it as well. The problem is that I am pretty out of shape, so I was struggling when I started. The workout plan doesn't have sound, just a 30-second timer and some text telling you when to rest and what to do next. If you're just concentrating on working out, you can sometimes miss your cue to take a break. Easy solution, each of us will watch the time for the other person. This all leads up to me, on the second day of exercises, absolutely dying while doing split jumps. My fiancé is sitting on the sidelines with helpful comments like go down lower, and you need to jump higher. I'm tired and a little grumpy, so I half-jokingly told her to stop talking. She immediately goes silent and I'm briefly worried I may have upset her. I'll check with her as soon as my break comes along. I continue to do my split jumps. And I keep going, and going, and going. 30 seconds seem like an eternity when you're trying to exercise. I can't look at the screen because my fiancé has it. I continue to do those evil split jumps. I stop. She busts up laughing and shows me the time. I'm 20 seconds into my break. That's what I get for telling her not to talk. Now I use my phone timer that beeps every 30 seconds and we do the sets together. The next story is titled, Eat It or Sit on It. When I was a kid, I'd go stay at my grandma's sometimes. I wouldn't always want to finish my food, so she'd tell me to eat it or sit on it. One day, I decided to do exactly that, sit on my bowl of rice and black beans. So there I was, a first grader sitting on top of my plate on the table when my grandma came back into the room. She wasn't happy, but she respected it, helped me clean up, and never told me, eat it or sit on it again. The next story is titled, We Gotta Have Clean Magazines, Too? If you insist, I visited NYC a few years ago. Long story short, I end up getting a behind-the-scenes tour of a cool business near Times Square. Business is aimed at tourists, and is located in a building with additional storefronts, and residences above. The guy giving me the tour runs the business I was visiting, but the biz, and the entire building, is owned by his boss, who also owns the other storefronts in the building, and those are managed by other people. So one owner. One building. Several businesses. But the unrelated businesses share an employee lounge area, bathrooms, etc. And through this back area you can move between the different stores, so the employees all know each other. And part of our tour is that area, and then the other storefronts, one of which is an old-school adult bookstore. Lots of sex toys, adult magazines, etc. Except some years back, in an effort to clean up Times Square and make it more tourist-friendly, a law was passed that all magazine stores had to have at least 20% of their magazines be non-pornographic. So, Time magazine, Vogue, People, that sort of stuff. No problem. The stores complied. And we were surrounded by the latest issues of hundreds of porno mags, while 20% of the stock was traditional magazines that hadn't been touched in years. They were literally the same magazines that had been purchased when the law was enacted, to meet the bare minimum percentage. The law never said they had to be current issues, and no one ever bought them at this store, so they sat there fulfilling their legal requirement, and nothing else. Well played, adult bookstore. Well played. The next story is titled, Enjoy Your Hand Sanitizer. This story contains entitlement and I may post it on entitled parents, kids too. Just a by the way, so I have this friend, sorta, let's call her Karen even though she is the same age as me, a teenager. When we were younger I caught her a few times having stolen stuff from me and her friends, and was generally a stealing lying idiot. But we sometimes got along and our relationship is complicated and she thinks we are fantastic friends, so I don't tell her otherwise. She also set me up with my current GF, but that's a different story. I also have really good peripheral vision, and people often got mad when I could see them do stuff out of the corner of my eye that they thought I couldn't. So I went shopping with my friends late last year and my friend, not Karen, drags me into a certain shop for body products. As it was one of the last shops we could go to and I still had a decent amount of money left, I bought a lip balm and 2 small scented, expensive as hell, bottle of hand sanitizer. I never use them, so the size of them didn't bother me. It was just for random occasions when I needed them, or wanted my hands to smell nice. I got home, put them on my desk and used them about 3 times the rest of the year. Then in about March, Karen came over and asked, "Hey, can I have one of these bottles of hand sanitizer?" And I tell her no, I bought them myself and they are very expensive. She looks at me, fake smiling, and says, "Oh, okay then," and I swear I can see her grab one off the desk very obviously as soon as I turn back to my PC. Without looking at her I say, "Put that bottle the duck back." I said no. Karen is surprised and quickly puts it back, looking at me innocently saying, "What do you mean?" At this point I look up and say, "You know I have good vision. Don't try and take my stuff when I have told you no." I then reached over and put the bottles in my desk drawer and go back to what I was doing. The next day she comes over again and her mum is with her. The mother starts getting mad at me, saying Karen told her I stole her hand sanitizer and that I locked it in my desk. I told her I don't have a lock on my desk, and that I bought that hand sanitizer last year. She was still mad and shouting at me to give her the hand sanitizer. No one else was home as my family were all shopping or at school. I go to online school and Karen is homeschooled, so no one could back me up or save me from her. I finally get fed up, go inside and grab one of the bottles of hand sanitizer and an old lotion tube I never threw away cause I'm messy. I screw off the cap of the lotion lid, and squeeze the sanitizer into the bottle, sealing it back up and putting it in my desk. I put the bottle in my pocket and walk back to the door. "This'll just take a moment, I forgot I put it in the kitchen." She nods, still mad, and Karen is smiling in success as I walk off again. I reach the kitchen and grab a bottle of ketchup, mixing it with chunky aloe vera gel and awkwardly shoving it into the hand sanitizer bottle. This makes a sorta translucent pink gel that looks like a strawberry hand sanitizer, as that was the scent for this one. The smell of the original hand sanitizer is very strong and it overpowers the ketchup, making it seem convincing. I come back and hand her the tiny bottle of ketchup and aloe vera, looking directly at Karen and saying, "I'm so sorry I stole, I don't know what came over me." They both looked smug and turned to leave, her parents saying, "She won't be returning again. I don't want you stealing more of her stuff, and you're lucky we don't press charges on you because you're a kid." I put on a sad face and say, "That's a shame," before slamming the door in her stuck-up face. I hope she enjoys her hand sanitizer. The next story is titled, "Lock the Door." This is accidental malicious compliance. When I was around maybe 6, I was out with my grandparents and one of their friends that lived near them. We had just eaten at a fast food place and were heading out to the car. Grandpa driving, friend in the front seat, me and Grandma in the back. My grandpa was born in a different country, and while his English is more than proficient, sometimes he would use a wrong word that was similar to the one he meant. I got into the back, slid over, and left the door open for Grandma. Grandpa and friend got into the front. Normally Grandma should have been in the car by now because she was faster, more mobile than their friend. I forget why, but she got delayed somehow, dropped something maybe? Not much of a delay, but enough that they were seated in the front and talking already. Grandpa was ready to go and yelled, "Lock the door. Quick temper." Now, what he meant was, "Close the door," but I maliciously complied and closed the door and locked it while he started the car. Grandma got to the door and couldn't open it. I stared dumbfounded, confused, having done what I was told to do. Before he realized his wife wasn't in the car, he started to drive towards the exit of the parking lot, with my grandma staring dumbstruck as he did. Almost to the exit I said, "But what about Grandma?" which made him look in the mirror and quickly turn around in the parking lot. She was kind of amused when I said, "He told me to lock the door," knowing he meant close it, a common mistake for him. We all had a laugh. The next story is titled, "Trash Across the Front Porch." One day, my ex and I were cleaning the kitchen after a social gathering. I was doing the dishes when I asked my ex, "Can you throw the trash?" My ex picked up the trash bag, opened the front door, threw the trash bag in the air, which proceeded to rip open, spreading its contents all over the front porch. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I angrily yelled, to which my ex replied, "You told me to throw the trash, so I threw it." This is how I learned, and never forgot, the difference between throw and throw away. The next story is titled, "I Said Hello, I Did It." Our neighbor has recently had their second child. We have a daughter slightly younger than their eldest daughter, 3 years old, but they've not seen much of each other due to the lockdown. We baked some strawberry shortcake and took some round to be neighborly. My daughter spent the whole time we were on the doorstep asking to go home. 1 week later we're popping round again but taking dinner so they don't have to cook. Before we leave, and on the way, I keep telling my daughter, "You have to say hello to her," the neighbor's daughter. I keep getting the response, "Okay, Daddy." We knock on the door and as soon as it opens she pipes up, "Hello, A." Then silence. She says nothing for the next 10 minutes we spend chatting to them. On the walk home I asked her why she didn't say anything. I got the reply, "You told me to say hello to A, I did it." I couldn't fault her logic. I changed the subject. It's wise to know when you've been beaten. The next story is titled, "What are you going to do? Make me?" I was a senior, and my sister a freshman in high school. My sister had her boyfriend over while our mum was out shopping. I was in my room playing video games, while my sister and her BF were in her room. Our mum had a "the door must be open with company" rule. Didn't matter who or why the company was there. It applied to my male friends, I'm male, just as much as it did to girlfriends, etc. So as I'm walking down the hall to the bathroom, her door is ajar, enough for the rule, and you can hear obvious making out. Okay, none of my business. As I start to head back to my room I hear, "No, I don't want to, my brother is home." That gets my attention. I walked up to her door and looked in. I was there just in time to see her BF just standing there, pantsless, nothing but a pair of boxers on under his shirt, saying, "It's okay, what's he going to do about it?" Well, sir. You had my attention. Now you have my interest. I start opening the door as my sister tells him, "No, it's not a good idea," before they both realize they're not alone. So you have my sister fully dressed sitting on her bed, her BF in a t-shirt and boxers, his pants on the other side of the room, and I all looking at each other. In high school I had a reputation for being a bit of a dweeb. I openly played D&D, this was the 90s, read sci-fi, and had who would W and fantasy battles with friends before class. I was also a high-level performer on my swim team, a soccer player, a member of the marching band, and a formerly very active Boy Scout. I was in surprisingly good shape. I'm also 6 feet 6 inches tall. I just looked at him and asked her if she was okay. She said yes. I told him he was told no, and he had to go home. He replied that his folks weren't home to pick him up. This was before cell phones were ubiquitous. I told him I didn't care. Call home, sit on the curb by the road on the opposite side of the street, or walk, just get his stuff and leave. He asked, "What, are you going to throw me out without pants?" Over the next 5 minutes, I grabbed him. Dragged him down the stairs. Out the front door. Across the lawn. And kicked him into the street. After he disappeared from view, I put his stuff in a box and mailed it to his house. He tried confronting me about it at school the next day. In front of the entire 100-member marching band. The next story is titled, "You said to use all the trays." I was a supervisor at a movie theater a few years back. I took over a regular non-supervisor shift in concessions, so there was already another supervisor working with me. Me and this supervisor, we'll call him Adam, were on pretty good terms. We get told by a senior manager, we'll call him Kevin, to fill 2 rolling racks with pre-made trays that we put nachos in. Filling them is simple enough. Unfold trays, place them on aluminum baking sheets so they're ready to be filled, and leave 1 slot empty between sheets. This part is really important, because when we put nachos in the trays we need the space so the chips don't break after we fill them. So Adam and I fill the racks as we normally would and call it a good. After this, we roll them in back because we don't need them right now. Adam gets sent home around 2 that day. We were slow as hell, and I take over the stand as supervisor. About 15 minutes later, Kevin calls me in back. Before I continue, let's be clear that with many managers, 2 senior managers, several supervisors, and about 60 employees, there is definitely some favoritism going on. Adam was on excellent terms with Kevin and they talked regularly like they were friends. On a good day, I was on okay terms with Kevin. He didn't hate me and he was pretty fair with me for the most part, but he wasn't necessarily fond of me either. Our overall professional relationship was pretty rocky. Overall though, I still think he was a good guy. Anyway, not the point. Point is he calls me in back to tell me, just me, he made no mention of Adam, that he distinctly telling me that he wanted those racks full. Apparently more full than we normally make them. I would have loved to tell him that that's what we normally do and that Adam said it was good. But I was trying to get promoted at the time, so far be it for me to challenge my senior manager. Plus my anxiety wouldn't allow it. So the first thing I did after getting done with Kevin was to consolidate all the nacho trays as best as I could. After that we had one full rack and one virtually empty rack. So then I started assembling more trays and filling more sheets. This is interspersed with me trying to get daily jobs done, hopping on register to help out customers, and giving people breaks. So about an hour and a half after this, I used up all the clean trays we had. However, the rack still wasn't completely filled per Kevin's instructions. I didn't want to bug Kevin with it because he had other stuff to do. I also didn't know if he wouldn't accept this as being done. Something important to know before moving on, we used the baking sheets for a lot of things. We used them to dump out batches of popcorn that we had accidentally burnt. We used them for the first batch of the day so people didn't get sick off of the cleaning chemicals, and last batch of the night so we could close out more quickly. We also used them to place and pre-count frozen items so we didn't use the counters. There were other things I'm forgetting about, but you get the idea. Then in my desire to show motivation, relieve my anxiety, and just be a smart ass, all provided me with an epiphany, almost though it were a sign from God himself. I had used all of the clean sheets. There were still some dirty ones that I had not used, but could easily be cleaned. Very easily in fact. I then proceed to clean all of our dirty trays so as to fill the rest of this rack. During this time, the closing supervisor, Katie, comes in. Katie and I used to have a very good working relationship. But in some months prior to this point, we had falling out. We were still polite to each other, but the damage had been done. So after briefing her on what she needs to know, who on mid-shift has had breaks, which movies are busy, etc., I tell her about Kevin's directive regarding the nachos and she vehemently disagrees. She makes the argument that if I use all of the baking sheets, we won't have for the rest of the week for all the other stuff we needed them for. After going back and forth with her a bit, consulting a third supervisor, and bringing up the fact that Kevin outranks both of us, she says the magic words, "Fine, do what you want, I don't care." What I wanted was to not get idioted at by Kevin again. So I used the rest of the baking sheets for the nacho trays. At this point, we now have none left for anything. About an hour later, I see Kevin and tell him that I finished the nacho trays. He just says thanks and continues about his day. So of course, given the relative importance of having trays, this creates problems for the next few days. Concession struggles to come up with baking sheets for when we need them, usually only having 2 free any given point that then have to be washed immediately after use. It also took until Friday, this all happened on a Monday, to sell out of the amount of nachos we needed to have more than 2 usable baking sheets. If you're wondering why we didn't just remove the empty trays from the racks, it was because the managers only brought us the rack with full nacho trays. At the supervisor meeting with senior managers 2 weeks later, Katie mentioned that using every single baking sheet was a bad idea and that it ought not be done again. It didn't take her urging by any means, but it was never done again. The next story is titled Dinnertime Compliance. Back when I was a kid, we had a rule where you weren't allowed to start eating food before we had said the blessing. The penalty for doing so was having to wait 1 minute to start eating after the blessing for each bite you had taken before the blessing. I hated this rule because I didn't like waiting to eat. What I figured out is if I ate my whole dinner before the blessing, I wouldn't have any food to have to wait to eat after the blessing. I got about halfway through my plate before my mum figured out my plan, and the jig was up, but it was totally worth it. The next story is titled Changing Channels is a Turn. Okay. Backstory. So my brother and I are always fighting and this quarantine is making everything tenser. So the agreement we had before was that if you watch one movie I'll watch one movie. Same thing for shows. Story. So one day, I was just browsing the channels looking for something to watch. Then, my brother, annoyed that I still haven't chosen anything, decided to whine to my mother. He kept on saying that whenever I chose a channel, it was a turn. My mum, annoyed at his whining, said fine. New rule. Okay then. So the next day, I pretended to be asleep but I had a pen and a small notepad with my watch with me. I then waited for him to turn on the TV. I then took a list of all the 11 channels he browsed through. I then waited until yesterday to put my plan into action. With my compiled list of the 11 channels all with the date and time. I made microwave popcorn and got comfortable. After my first movie, my brother demanded that I give him the remote but I didn't. He then went to our mum and whined. I then showed her list and reminded her of the new rule. My brother then tried to contest the rule, but I reminded him that he was the one to make the rule in the first place. My mother relented and said that it was my turn for the next 11 movies, shows. I watched all the Avengers movies and a few episodes of the Grand Tour. He was so pissed when I decided to watch Infinity War and Endgame. That's it. My short but sweet malicious compliance. The next story is titled All the Comforts, Germany in the 80s. There was a yearly recurring nightmare called REFORGER, wherein NATO brought reinforcements into Germany from all over the globe to demonstrate how badass we were. It was 6 weeks of smelly armpits, grey undergarments and mud. I was in a small aviation company and was their de facto liaison officer and aviator extraordinaire for these affairs because of my intimate knowledge of the local culture and ability to arrange military affairs. I was responsible for site improvements, which meant finding and arranging better field sites. A major part of this was to coordinate with the local porta-potty purveyors so that adequate facilities were available. One fine day, our battalion commander visited and observed how well set up our location was. He was particularly interested in our toilet facilities. Once he had returned to HQ, it was announced that we would be relocating, that night, to a completely unimproved mud hole and that HQ would be moving to our location. We dutifully packed up, issued chalk numbers to all vehicles and at 2 a.m., drove out to the new site as the colonel smilingly watched us pass by. His smile completely disappeared when he saw that, in our midst, happily convoying along, was the local porta-potty purveyor with his honey wagon, septic truck, and all 4 potties on the back. Good luck with your army-issued toilet paper, sir. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.